The sun burned like fire over the endless desert of Zerath. The air shimmered with heat and the ground looked like melted glass. Ethan walked slowly across the dunes, his boots sinking into soft orange dust. Every step felt heavier than the last. Every breath scraped his throat dry. He was a human explorer, stranded on this dying planet after his ship crashed 3 days ago. The water in his bottle was almost gone, the metal canteen now lighter than a feather. He had seen no signs of life, no movement, not even the sound of wind. Only silence, deep and endless silence, the kind that makes a man feel small. Like a lost grain of sand in a vast universe, his suit's temperature alarm blinked red. Warning him of dehydration, Ethan ignored it, focusing only on the horizon. He hoped to find the wreckage of his communication pod, maybe a working signal. But all he found was more desert, more emptiness. His lips were cracked, and his eyes burned from the dust. He whispered to himself, trying to stay awake, "Come on, Ethan. Just keep walking." Then something strange happened through the waves of heat. He saw movement, a faint shadow in the distance. At first he thought it was a mirage, a trick of his tired mind, but the shape didn't vanish. It grew clearer, closer. Someone, or something, was watching him. Ethan froze, hand on the small laser pistol strapped to his side. The figure stepped out from behind a dune. It was small, maybe the size of a child, but not human. Her skin was pale blue, dry and cracked like the desert ground. Her hair floated softly in the hot air, glowing faintly white, and her eyes were large, bright, and glassy, unshimmered like the sky before rain. She stood still, holding something close to her chest. Ethan didn't move, afraid to scare her away. He slowly raised a hand, trying to show he meant no harm. "Hey, it's okay," he said quietly, voice rough and tired. The alien girl tilted her head, watching him carefully. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She looked weak, trembling like she might fall any moment. After a few seconds, she took a step forward, then another. Ethan noticed her bare feet leaving shallow marks in the dust. Her skin was peeling from heat and thirst. She looked like she hadn't had water in days. Maybe longer. Finally, she stopped a few feet away. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Water, please." Ethan blinked, shocked that she could speak even a little English. He looked at his canteen, then back at her. He had only a few drops left, barely enough for himself. But the girl's eyes, wide and desperate, cut into his heart. She held out her trembling hands. In them, she carried a small round crystal. It glowed softly, like a living light trapped inside. She lifted it toward him and whispered again, "Water. I give treasure." Ethan stared at the crystal. It looked valuable, maybe priceless, but more than that, it looked alive. Something inside it pulsed, slow and gentle. Like a heartbeat, he hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. The logical part of his mind screamed to save his water. The human part whispered to help her. The desert wind picked up, blowing hot sand around them. The girl swayed weakly, her knees giving out. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground. Her body felt light, almost weightless. Her breathing was shallow and her skin was burning hot. He opened his canteen and stared at the few drops left inside. His throat ached just looking at it, but something inside him, maybe guilt, maybe humanity, told him what he had to do. He tilted the bottle gently, letting a single drop fall on her lips. Then another. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the crystal in her hand glowed brighter. A soft hum filled the air like the sound of wind through glass. Ethan looked around. The sand beneath them began to move slightly. Trembling as if alive, the girl's eyes opened again. Faint light shining within them, she whispered, voice soft but clear, "Thank you, human." Ethan felt a strange warmth in his hand where he touched her skin. It wasn't just heat, it was energy, a pulse of life spreading from her to him. The desert, once silent, now seemed to whisper. A low vibration echoed through the ground. The crystal pulsed again, brighter this time. Ethan looked at it, realizing something wasn't right. This wasn't just a simple object. It was something powerful, something ancient. The girl's eyes met his again, and in that moment, he understood, and this meeting was no accident. Above them, the clouds began to form for the first time in years. The sky darkened slightly, and Ethan felt a chill run through his spine. The desert wasn't dead anymore. Something had just awakened. He didn't know it yet. But this was the moment everything changed. The wind howled softly across the dunes, carrying with it the faint echo of something ancient. Ethan sat beside the alien girl, watching the strange crystal glow in her trembling hands. He didn't understand how, but Ever since he gave her that tiny bit of water, the air around them had changed. It felt alive, pulsing like a heartbeat through the ground. The girl was still weak, her breathing shallow, but her eyes now glowed faintly with light. She looked fragile, yet something about her felt powerful. Like a sleeping storm, Ethan reached out slowly, pointing at the crystal. "What is that?" he asked carefully. The girl looked at him, her eyes soft but wary. She held the glowing sphere closer like it was part of her. Her voice was faint, broken. "My heart. My people's last hope." Ethan frowned, unsure if he heard her right. Her heart? A treasure? It didn't make sense. He scanned it using his wrist device. The readings were off the charts. Energy, unknown origin, radiation harmless but powerful. It wasn't just light. It was alive. Ethan had seen many strange things across galaxies, but nothing like this. The girl noticed his confusion, and a weak smile touched her lips. "You human?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, human, from Earth." At the word Earth, her smile faded. Her glowing eyes darkened slightly, filled with sadness. "Earth, they came here," she whispered. Ethan blinked. "Who came here?" She looked away, her voice trembling. "Humans. They took everything." The wind fell silent for a moment. Ethan's heart sank. He realized the terrible truth. The reason this planet looked so lifeless. It wasn't nature that killed it. It was greed long before his crash. Human mining ships had stripped this world of water and resources, leaving it a desert grave. And now, he was face to face with one of its last survivors. Ethan felt guilt twist inside him. Even though he wasn't part of that mission, he represented the same species. The same mistakes. He looked at the girl again, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. She was clutching that glowing sphere tighter now. He wanted to speak, to explain, to say sorry, but the words refused to come. Then suddenly the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumble rolled through the desert like thunder under the sand. Ethan quickly looked around, hand on his weapon. The girl gasped, covering the crystal with both arms. "No, they come," she whispered, fear in her voice. Who's coming?" Ethan asked sharply. She didn't answer. Her eyes darted to the sky. Ethan followed her gaze far above. A dark shape moved, a shadow sliding across the burning sky. It wasn't a bird, it was metallic. A human drone, scanning the surface for life. The red sensor light swept across the desert. Growing closer, Ethan cursed under his breath. If the drone found him, it would signal his location to the recovery fleet. But that wasn't the real problem. Those drones were programmed to eliminate alien life. He grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her behind a broken metal ridge from his ship's wreckage. "Stay quiet," he whispered urgently. The drone hummed louder, scanning, beeping, pausing. The girl trembled beside him, the crystal pulsing faster like a beating heart. Ethan watched the red light pass over them once, twice, then for a moment it stopped. His chest tightened. "Please don't see us," he muttered under his breath. A burst of static filled the air, then silence. The drone turned away and flew off toward the west. Disappearing into the heat haze, Ethan exhaled deeply, his heart pounding. The girl looked up, eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you, human," she whispered again. Ethan shook his head. "No, don't thank me." He paused, studying her face. "You said humans took everything. What did they take?" The girl looked down at the sand. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They took our sky, our water, our children." A single tear slid down her cracked cheek, evaporating before it hit the ground. Ethan felt something heavy in his chest, a feeling he hadn't known in years. He wanted to protect her, though he didn't even know her name. He asked gently, "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated, the name feeling strange but beautiful. She nodded weakly, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared. The crystal glowed brighter, reacting to the sound of her name. Ethan realized something. This wasn't just energy, it was connected to her emotions. It was alive because she was alive. He leaned back against the dune, staring at the strange alien girl beside him. He had met countless beings across the stars, but never one who made him feel this much. The desert wind had softened now, cooler somehow. Ethan glanced at the horizon for a brief moment. He thought he saw clouds again. Lyra noticed too, her eyes shining. "The world remembers," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "Remembers what?" She closed her eyes and said, "That life can return, if hearts choose kindness." Ethan didn't know what to say, he just stared at her. This small, fragile being who had lost everything but still offered him her treasure for a drop of water. And as the last rays of the dying sun touched their faces, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He could not leave her because somehow deep inside, he knew their fates were now bound together, and whatever came next would change everything. The night fell over Zareth like a silent blanket, hiding the endless scars of the desert beneath a sky full of dying stars. Ethan sat beside the small campfire he had made from broken ship panels and dry metal wires. The faint orange light flickered across the alien girl's face, showing the tired lines beneath her glowing eyes. Lyra sat quietly, holding the crystal sphere close to her chest, its blue light rising and falling like slow breathing. The silence between them was heavy, not uncomfortable but filled with questions neither dared to ask. Ethan looked at the sky where two moons hung low like watchful eyes. He had seen many worlds, many ruins, but something about this place made his chest tighten. Maybe it was the guilt, or maybe it was her, this strange being who had traded her only treasure just for a drop of water. He finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. "So this thing," he said, nodding at the crystal. "It's really your heart?" Lyra didn't look at him, she simply nodded. "It keeps me alive." "And the world," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, the world?" She looked up at him, eyes shining faintly. "This planet lives through us when my people die. Zareth dies too." Ethan stared at her, realizing the truth. The desert wasn't just lifeless, it was mourning. Every grain of sand carried the memory of her dying race. He clenched his jaw, trying to hide the wave of shame that hit him. He wanted to tell her that not all humans were monsters, that he wasn't like them. But before he could speak, his wrist scanner beeped softly, a weak signal, faint but human. He looked down at the small blinking icon, heart pounding. It was a distress beacon from his ship. Still functional, he could send a signal to orbit, and maybe, just maybe, get rescued. But there was a problem. If the rescue ship came, they would scan the area. They would find Lyra and the crystal, and they would take them both. He looked at her again, the decision heavy in his chest, save himself, or save her. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. He had dreamed of returning to Earth, of seeing the ocean again, of feeling rain, but now, staring at Lyra, he realized going home would mean betraying the last living soul of this world. The fire crackled softly. Lyra turned her head, noticing the tension in his eyes. "You found a signal," she said quietly, her voice more statement than question. Ethan didn't answer. She smiled sadly, as if she already knew his thoughts. "You can go. Your people will come." Ethan shook his head. "If they come, they'll destroy what's left here." Lyra's smile faded, her hands tightening around the glowing heart. "Then you must choose, human," she whispered. "Choose what kind of man you want to be." The words hit him harder than any bullet. He looked away, ashamed, unable to meet her eyes. The night grew colder. The fire dimmed, and the only sound was the low hum of the crystal. He could almost hear it whispering, calling softly, not in words, but in feeling, life, warmth, hope. Suddenly, a small tremor shook the ground beneath them. Ethan jumped to his feet, scanning the horizon from the darkness. A strange light began to rise, faint blue at first, then bright white. The sand lifted and spiraled, forming a twisting column that reached toward the sky. Lyra stood, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "It's calling the storm." Ethan's scanner flashed warnings. "Radiation levels spiking. What's happening?" He shouted over the roaring wind. Lyra clutched the crystal tightly, her hair whipping in the air. "The world knows you've found me," she cried. "It can feel my fear." The sky darkened, lightning cracked across the horizon. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the wreckage for cover. Sand slashed against their faces like knives, the storm growing wild through the chaos. The crystal pulsed brighter and brighter until the whole desert glowed like blue fire. Ethan covered his eyes, shouting, "Lyra, stop! You'll kill yourself!" But she shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't stop it. The planet remembers pain," she cried. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, shielding her from the storm. "I won't let it take you," he whispered, voice breaking. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm stopped. The world fell silent again. Dust slowly drifted down through the air like ashes. Ethan looked around. Half of the dune field had collapsed. revealing something buried beneath a metal structure. Ancient, massive, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Lyra stared at it in shock. "The Temple of Hearts," she breathed. Ethan blinked. "What is that?" She turned to him, her eyes filled with wonder and fear. "It's where my people's power sleeps, and maybe where I can save them." Ethan looked at her, then at the ruins. The beacon on his wrist blinked again. Rescue within range. He had minutes to decide, leave and survive, or stay and uncover the truth of a dying world. The hum of the crystal grew louder, almost like a heartbeat in the air. Lyra looked at him and said softly, "If you go now, I understand. But if you stay, everything will change." Ethan looked at his wrist, then at her. The choice tore him apart. Finally, he took off the communicator and threw it into the sand. "I've made my choice," he said quietly. Lyra stared at him in silence, then smiled, a real bright smile, and the crystal in her hands blazed with light, casting the desert in shades of gold and blue. For the first time since his crash, Ethan felt alive, not because he had hope of escape, but because he had found something worth saving. The wind carried silence over the ruins of the temple, a silence that felt alive, heavy, and waiting. The sand shimmered faintly under the pale twin moons, reflecting soft blue light from the glowing crystal in Lyra's hands. Ethan stood beside her, staring at the half-buried structure rising from the desert like the bones of a giant. It was made of smooth black metal, covered in strange glowing lines that pulsed faintly. Like veins of light, the air around it was colder, thicker, and full of static energy. Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft with awe. "This is where my people spoke to the world," she whispered. Ethan followed, eyes wide, scanning the massive archways that led deep into the temple's heart. "Spoke to the world?" he repeated. "You mean the planet itself?" She nodded slowly. "The world is not dead. It only sleeps. It dreams through the hearts of my people." Her words sent a chill through him. The idea that this planet was somehow alive and connected to her was both beautiful and terrifying. He touched one of the metal walls, and for a moment it felt warm, almost like skin. Symbols glowed faintly beneath his palm, and Lyra's crystal responded. Glowing brighter, she gasped, turning to him. "It knows you," she said. Eyes wide, Ethan frowned, confused. "Knows me? How could it?" She stepped closer, her eyes glowing brighter now. "Because you chose kindness when you didn't have to." Before Ethan could reply, the ground trembled. A deep rumble rolled beneath their feet like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The temple lights flickered, then came alive, sending streams of energy up through the ruins. The sky darkened as clouds began to gather overhead, swirling faster and faster. Ethan backed away, pulling Lyra toward him. "What's happening?" he shouted over the rising wind. Lyra's eyes reflected the lightning flashing above. "The world is waking," she said, her voice trembling. "But it remembers its pain." A blinding light burst from the center of the temple, shooting upward into the clouds, a beam of blue fire that split the night sky. The wind turned violent, throwing sand and dust around them. Ethan shielded Lyra with his body as shards of metal tore loose from the ruins. His communicator blinked weakly on his wrist, picking up multiple signals. Something big was coming. Lyra clutched the crystal tighter, her hands shaking. The energy around her grew stronger, lifting small stones into the air. "Lyra!" Ethan shouted. "You have to stop." Tears streamed down her face, her voice breaking. "I can't." The planet feels the fear, the hurt. It remembers the humans who destroyed it. Lightning cracked across the dunes, striking the sand and turning it to glass. A massive shape rose from the storm. A colossal figure of sand and light, half-formed, like the spirit of the planet itself. Ethan stared in disbelief. It looked almost human, but vast and shifting. Its body made of swirling dust and glowing veins of blue energy. It roared, and not a sound of anger, but of sorrow. The cry echoed through the desert, shaking Ethan to his knees. Lyra fell beside him, clutching her chest. "It's the Guardian," she gasped. "The soul of Zerath. It's been alone for too long." Ethan grabbed her shoulders, shouting over the storm. "Then tell it we're not enemies." She shook her head weakly. "It doesn't understand words. Only hearts." The Guardian turned its glowing eyes toward them, its gaze burning like twin suns. Ethan felt his heartbeat match the rhythm of the planet's pulse, faster, louder. He reached out instinctively. Grabbing Lyra's hand, her crystal blazed in response, flooding the temple with light. For a moment, He saw visions, flashes of another time. Lyra's people dancing in green fields, rivers sparkling under twin moons. Laughter and peace, then came fire machines, ships descending, the sky burning red. The vision ended as quickly as it came, leaving Ethan gasping for air. The Guardian roared again, towering above them. Ethan shouted, "Lyra, if it feels what we feel, then make it feel hope." She looked at him through tears. "Hope?" He nodded, gripping her hand tighter. "Yes, don't let it remember the pain. Show it kindness. Show it what life can still be." Lyra closed her eyes, clutching the glowing heart to her chest. She whispered softly, her voice blending with the wind. "I forgive you. I forgive all that was lost." The storm began to calm. The light of the Guardian shifting from blue to gold. Its massive form bent down, touching the temple gently. The sand began to settle, the air cooling as the clouds thinned. A faint drizzle of rain fell. The first in 100 years. Ethan looked up, feeling cold drops hit his face. Lyra smiled faintly through tears. "The planet is crying," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, shaking his head in awe. "No, Lyra. It's healing." The Guardian slowly faded, dissolving into thousands of tiny lights that floated into the sky like fireflies. The temple's glow dimmed again. Resting quietly as if content, Ethan turned to Lyra, her skin now glowing softly in the moonlight. She looked exhausted but peaceful. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, we did." In the distance, thunder rolled once more. But this time it sounded gentle, almost like a heartbeat. The planet of Zirath was no longer silent. Something ancient had awakened, and for the first time it remembered kindness. Ethan didn't know what came next, but deep down, he understood this was only the beginning, and the choice he made tonight would decide the fate of two worlds. The next morning rose quietly over the dunes, soft light spilling across the broken metal and sleeping sand. The storm had ended, but the air still hummed with leftover energy, faint sparks of light dancing on the surface like morning dew made of stars. Ethan stood on a dune's edge, staring at the horizon where the twin suns began to rise. The sky glowed orange and silver, and for a rare moment the world looked alive again. He could see small green sprouts breaking through the sand, tiny blades of grass pushing up from the earth. Zirath was healing behind him. Lyra slept near the ruins of the temple, her breathing calm, her crystal faintly glowing against her chest. Ethan smiled softly. She looked peaceful, almost human when she slept. But deep inside, a worry stirred, the kind that gnaws at you quietly. He turned on his wrist device and froze. A blinking signal filled the screen. "Incoming transmission. Human coordinates." Close, a voice crackled faintly through static. "Unit 27, recovery drone dispatched. Human life signs confirmed, retrieval in progress." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had destroyed his beacon, but the ship's systems must have auto-pinged the fleet before power died. They were coming, and if they found Lyra, they would take her, experiment on her, maybe worse. He turned toward her sleeping form, the glowing heart rising and falling with each breath. He couldn't let them touch her, not after everything. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the rising suns. Ethan looked up, eyes narrowing. A massive dark shape moved through the sky. A drone carrier, its engines rumbling like thunder. A smaller drone detached and began scanning the ground below, its red sensors sweeping across the dunes. Ethan cursed under his breath and ran back to Lyra, shaking her shoulder gently. "Lyra, wake up. We have to move." Her eyes opened slowly, still heavy with sleep. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. "They found us," he said, voice low and urgent. Her expression changed instantly, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. "No, not again," she whispered, clutching the crystal tight. Ethan grabbed his gear and motioned for her to follow. They moved quickly through the broken ruins, staying low, using the fallen pillars for cover. The drone's red beam swept across the area, scanning, humming like a predator sniffing for prey. Lyra's skin shimmered faintly, reacting to its sensors. Ethan turned to her, whispering harshly, "Turn it off and the glow, it's picking it up," she tried, closing her eyes, forcing the light to fade. But fear made it flicker even stronger. The drone paused, its sensors locking onto their position. A piercing alarm rang out. "Target detected," the mechanical voice said, cold and sharp. "Run!" Ethan shouted, grabbing her hand. They sprinted across the dunes as laser bolts scorched the sand behind them, each blast sending waves of heat across their backs. the air filled with the smell of burning dust and metal. Lyra stumbled, but Ethan pulled her forward. Refusing to let go, he fired his pistol back at the drone. The shots bounced off uselessly. "It's armored," he shouted, frustration in his voice. The drone adjusted its aim, locking onto Lyra. Her crystal pulsed violently, reacting to the danger. The ground beneath them trembled again. A sudden shockwave burst out, not from Ethan, but from her. The sand exploded upward, forming a wall of light that struck the drone head-on. The machine spiraled out of control, crashing into a nearby ridge. Flames erupting from its core, Ethan turned in shock, staring at her. "What was that?" Lyra was trembling, her hands shaking violently. "I didn't mean to." "It just happened," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. The energy, her power, it was growing stronger, maybe uncontrollable, before he could respond. A new sound echoed in the distance, engines, multiple, louder, faster. Ethan's wrist screen blinked again, warning, "Manned units approaching." He grabbed her hand again. "We can't stay here, more are coming." Lyra looked toward the horizon, her voice soft and broken. "They always come. They never stop." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then we'll make them stop," he said firmly. He guided her down into a hidden trench formed by old mining tunnels. Inside it was dark, cool, and quiet except for their breathing. Ethan leaned against the wall, trying to think. He had a few energy cells left, a pistol, and his damaged scanner. But no ship, no allies, no real plan. Still, he refused to give her up. Lyra sat beside him, looking at him with tired eyes. "Why do you help me?" she asked softly. Ethan paused, then said, "Because I've seen what humans can destroy. And I'm done watching." She looked down, then smiled faintly. Her hand brushed his, and the faint hum of the crystal filled the air again. It was calming, almost like a heartbeat between them. But their peace lasted only seconds. A metallic voice echoed through the tunnel entrance. "Human signature confirmed, alien life detected. Authorization for capture granted." Ethan stood instantly. Pulling Lyra behind him, 3 figures appeared. Human soldiers in black armor, their visors glowing red. One raised a weapon. "Step away from the alien now." Ethan raised his pistol but didn't move aside. "She's not your enemy," he said firmly. The soldier's voice was cold. "She's property of Earth Command now." Before Ethan could reply, one of the soldiers fired. The blast hit the wall beside him, sending debris flying. Ethan fired back, the tunnel lighting up with flashes of blue and red. Lyra screamed, clutching the crystal. It pulsed violently, brighter than ever. A wave of energy burst outward, throwing the soldiers off their feet. The tunnel shook, rocks collapsing from above. Ethan grabbed her and ran deeper into the darkness. Behind them, the walls crumbled, sealing the entrance. They stumbled into a lower chamber. Dust swirling around them, Ethan turned to her. Breathing hard, "Lyra, are you okay?" She nodded weakly, but her glow was fading. He held her close, whispering, "We'll find another way out, I promise." She looked up at him with glassy eyes, her voice trembling. "Ethan, they'll never stop." He met her gaze and said quietly, "Then neither will we." Far above them, the human ships circled the sky like vultures. The war between mercy and greed had begun again, and this time, one man and one alien girl stood between the darkness and the rebirth of a world. The tunnels of Zereth groaned like the bones of a dying beast. Dust fell from the ceiling as distant explosions echoed through the buried passages. Ethan held Lyra's hand tightly, pulling her through the darkness, guided only by the soft glow of her fading crystal. Every sound of collapsing rock reminded him that the soldiers were still above, searching, hunting, destroying everything in their path. The air was thick with heat and ash, and the ground trembled under every step. Lyra's breathing was weak, her light flickering dimly like a candle in a storm. Ethan glanced at her, worry etched deep into his face. "Stay with me," he said softly. She tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. "The world, it's hurting again," she whispered. Ethan nodded grimly. "I know, we'll get out, we'll fix this." A loud metallic thud echoed from behind them. Ethan turned, his heart pounding, through the haze. He saw shadows, human soldiers moving fast, flashlights cutting through the dust. Their voices rang cold and sharp. "Target ahead, seal the exits. Recover the asset alive," Ethan cursed under his breath, pulling Lyra toward a narrow corridor. "This way," he shouted. They ran through winding tunnels lined with ancient markings that glowed faintly as they passed. Each symbol reacted to Lyra's presence, lighting up in shades of blue and gold. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The air smelled of stone and times untouched for centuries. Finally, they reached a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. A large circular door stood at the center. Covered in strange alien patterns, Lyra stumbled, her knees giving way. Ethan caught her, holding her close. Her eyes glowed faintly as she whispered, "This is the gate of renewal. My ancestors built it to protect the heart of the world." Ethan looked at the massive door, its surface pulsing softly like it was alive. "How do we open it?" he asked quickly. Lyra placed her hand on the glowing metal. "It opens to truth." "Not force," she whispered. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, a sharp voice echoed behind them. "Freeze!" He turned to see 3 soldiers entering the chamber, their rifles aimed directly at them. The leader stepped forward, his armor gleaming in the faint blue light. "Step away from the alien," he ordered. Ethan raised his pistol but stayed where he was. "She's not your enemy," he said firmly. The soldier sneered. "She's not alive in your sense, and she's a resource, the key to infinite energy. Earth needs her." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No. Earth wants her, but Zerath needs her." The soldier raised his weapon. "Then you're a traitor," he said coldly. Ethan fired first, the blast lighting the chamber. The soldiers returned fire, bolts of energy striking the walls and floor. One hit the ancient door, and the entire room trembled violently. Lyra screamed as the crystal in her hands blazed with light. Energy rippled through the air, throwing everyone off their feet. The door responded, glowing brighter. Ancient mechanisms grinding to life. Symbols lit up across the walls, and a deep hum filled the chamber. Ethan crawled toward Lyra, shouting over the chaos. "Lyra, what's happening?" She looked at him, her voice trembling. "The gate, it's awakening, but it needs balance, my heart and yours." He frowned, confused. "My heart?" She reached for his hand, pressing the glowing crystal against his chest. Her voice was soft but clear. "You gave me water. You gave me mercy. The gate feels that." Light exploded between them. Ethan gasped as warmth surged through his veins. He saw flashes of her memories again, her people, her world before it burned. He saw laughter, songs, and a young Lyra running through fields of bluegrass under twin suns. Then he saw destruction, human ships blotting out the sky, fire raining down, her people crying out for mercy that never came. The images faded, replaced by Lyra's face, smiling softly through tears. "Now you understand," she whispered. The soldiers tried to rise, shouting into their radios. "Control, the gate is active, we need extraction." But it was too late. The ground split open, and a wave of light burst outward. Throwing them backward into the shadows, the massive door slowly opened, revealing a chamber beyond, filled with floating orbs of light and streams of glowing energy that flowed like rivers through the air. Ethan stared in awe. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Lyra smiled faintly. "It's the core of life, the world's soul." Ethan helped her stand, guiding her toward the open gateway. Behind them, explosions echoed. The soldiers were still fighting to reach them. "Go!" Ethan shouted. They ran together into the glowing chamber, the air thick with warmth and light. As soon as they stepped inside, the door began to close. A soldier tried to rush through, but the gate sealed shut with a flash of white light, trapping them inside, save for the moment inside. The light grew calmer, softer. Ethan looked around, amazed. The chamber pulsed like a living heart, each breath of light matching the rhythm of Lyra's crystal. She turned to him, her expression calm but sad. "This place can heal the planet, but it needs sacrifice," she said quietly. Ethan's heart tightened. "What kind of sacrifice?" She looked down, her fingers brushing the glowing sphere. "Mine," she whispered. Ethan shook his head instantly. "No, there has to be another way." Lyra smiled gently, tears glimmering in her eyes. "There's always another way, Ethan. But sometimes it chooses us." Before he could speak, the chamber's light flared. Surrounding them in gold and blue, the ground hummed. The air filled with whispers of her people, voices of peace, love, and farewell. Ethan grabbed her hand, refusing to let go. "I won't let you die," he said fiercely. She smiled, her voice soft. "Then live for me." The light engulfed them both, the hum growing into a song that echoed through the entire desert above. Outside, the barren sands began to shift, flowers blooming where ash once lay. The sky brightened, rain falling across Zerath for the first time in generations. And deep within the heart of the planet, two souls stood hand in hand, bound by kindness, defying fate and awakening life from the ashes. Silence filled the chamber like a dream between heartbeats. The light that surrounded Ethan and Lyra pulsed gently, wrapping them in waves of gold and blue. It wasn't just brightness, and it was warmth, alive and breathing. Like the soul of the planet itself had opened its eyes again. Ethan could barely see where the walls ended and the air began. Every inch of the chamber shimmered with floating sparks of memory. Whispering voices of the past, Lyra stood beside him, glowing brighter than ever before, her crystal heart pulsing in rhythm with the living light around them. Her hair drifted in the air like silver threads in water, her eyes shining with calm acceptance. Ethan looked at her, pain and awe tangled in his chest. He wanted to stop time to hold this moment forever, but the light around them was changing, growing stronger, deeper, almost calling her name. "What's happening?" he asked softly. Lyra smiled faintly. "The world is waking. It remembers love again," she whispered. Ethan shook his head, fear cutting through his wonder. "You said it needs a sacrifice, but it doesn't have to be you." She stepped closer, placing her hand gently on his chest. "It has to be me," she said softly. "My people were part of this world's heart, and I am the last beat that still lives." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "There has to be another way," he said. Voice trembling, Lyra looked at him with kind eyes. "You already gave the other way, Ethan." "Mercy." The light brightened again, spreading outward in ripples that shook the chamber walls. Above them, the world responded, the cracked land mending, rivers glowing faintly under the new rain, and the twin suns breaking through the clouds like reborn stars. Outside, soldiers stopped firing, their machines shorting out as vines and flowers pushed through the metal. Everywhere the energy touched, life began again inside. The glow around Lyra grew so bright Ethan could barely look at her. She looked peaceful now, her face calm, her hands trembling as she held the crystal to her heart. "Ethan," she whispered, "you gave me hope when there was none. Now I will give this world life again." He stepped forward, grabbing her shoulders, his voice breaking. "You don't have to die to do that." She smiled sadly. "Every life that ends gives another a chance to begin," he wanted to argue, to stop her, but the light between them grew stronger, pushing him back gently like a soft wave. The air filled with a low hum that sounded like 1,000 voices singing at once. Lyra closed her eyes, tears of light streaming down her face. "Don't be sad," she said softly. "This is not the end, it's only the next dawn." Ethan watched helplessly as her body began to dissolve into the golden glow. Her shape turned to dust made of stars floating upward toward the core above them. The crystal lifted from her chest, hovering in the air, spinning slowly, its glow now pulsing in perfect rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. He reached out, whispering her name, "Lyra." Her voice came back, not from her lips but from everywhere, gentle and warm. "Remember me, Ethan, not as a ghost of the past but as the light that walks beside you." The entire chamber shook with one final surge of energy. The crystal burst open, releasing a wave of light that shot through every tunnel, every stone, every grain of sand. The entire planet lit up on mountains, valleys, and skies, all glowing with new life outside. The soldiers watched as their ships powered down, covered in blooming vines and shimmering petals. The desert turned green before their eyes, water flowing freely once again, and for the first time in centuries, Zarath breathed. Ethan collapsed to his knees, tears running down his face. The chamber was quiet now, the light soft and golden. In the center where Lyra had stood, only the crystal remained. He reached out and picked it up carefully. Holding it close to his chest, it was warm, faintly pulsing and alive. He looked around the glowing chamber, whispering to the air, "You did it, Lyra! You saved them." Her voice echoed faintly, carried by the wind that now flowed through the temple. "No, we did." Ethan smiled weakly through his tears. He stood, walking slowly toward the exit tunnel. When he stepped outside, he froze. The sight before him stole his breath. The desert was gone, replaced by endless fields of green, rivers sparkling like liquid glass, and creatures of light soaring across the new sky. The air smelled fresh, clean, alive. He looked down at the glowing crystal in his hand. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat, he whispered. "I'll keep your promise." And as he walked across the reborn landscape, the crystal shone brighter. Lighting his path far above, the twin suns rose together, their light merging into one. And for the first time in its long, silent history, The planet of Zerath sang again. Its voice carried through the stars, and a song of mercy, of love, of life reborn. And somewhere in the warmth of that light, Ethan could almost hear Lyra's laughter, soft and distant, the sound of a world healed by kindness. The wind whispered through the fields. Brushing his face gently, he looked toward the horizon, the crystal still glowing in his hand, and with a quiet smile he said to the sky, "Maybe this is what humanity was meant to learn all along." The light answered him with silence, and a silence full of peace, full of promise, the silence of a world that had finally begun again.